Then you can go back to the Zoom screen. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Institute for Spiritual Development. I'm Diana Friedell, a pastor and co-director, and you have joined us in the middle of our service, our Sunday service, and we would like to welcome now to the pulpit, Reverend Renee Ranke, who has our homily this morning. Ready, Renee?
Get up and go. Well, you wanted me in the chair, I know. Morning, everybody. So I am going to start out with a reading for us today. So how many of you have ever heard of Richard Rohr? Carol has his JD none. So the reading I'm going to share today, Richard Rohr started an organization called the Center for Action and Contemplation, and they send out a daily, what they call meditation, which is more of a contemplation. This one is from Friday, June 19th, 2015. And it's written by Richard Rohr. We don't come to God by doing it right. Please believe me on this. We come to God by doing it wrong. Any guide of souls knows this to be true. If we come to God by being perfect, no one is going to come to God. This absolutely levels the playing field. Our failures open our hearts of stone and move the rigid mind space towards understanding and patience. It is in doing it wrong, being rejected and experiencing pain, that we are led to total reliance upon God. I wish it were not true, but all I know at this point in my journey is that God has let me do just about everything wrong, so I could fully experience how God can do everything so utterly right. I don't know how else I could know this so fully in my gut. This is why Christianity has as its central symbol of transformation a naked, bleeding man who is the picture of failing, losing, and dying, and who is really winning and revealing the secret pattern to those who will join him there. Everyone wins because if there's one thing we all have in common, if we're honest, it's our weakness and powerlessness in one, but usually many areas of our lives. There's a broken, wounded part inside each of us. Powerful stuff, huh? Good morning again. So a couple of weeks ago, someone that I went to high school with shared a post on Facebook that made me stop and think. It's one of those silly posts that asks you to make a choice between two imaginary scenarios. You know, the ones I'm talking about. So in a choice between limitless money and erasing all of your past mistakes, which would you choose? It almost seems like an easy choice on the surface. Money doesn't mean much in the scheme of things. What about all those bad choices I've made in life? The ones that have contributed to my suffering, or even worse, to the suffering of others. Shouldn't I change those if given the opportunity? Sitting there looking at that simple, silly Facebook post, I had an incredible revelation. If there really was a way for me to erase all my past mistakes, my past pain, and those things that I saw as my imperfect decisions, the me that is right now would not exist. I kind of like it. So I guess in this imaginary scenario, I have to suck it up and take the limitless money. So today, really hard. So today I would like to talk about imperfections. Those places that feel broken, painful, imperfect, incomplete, or just plain wrong. I feel as if our mistakes, our imperfections may be the most important part of this journey that we're on. So let's start with individual flaws, or better yet, let's start with my individual flaws. So for today's discussion, we're coming from a bigger place than the 30 pounds I need to lose. or the wrinkles that I wish weren't there, or the frizziness of my hair, or my really bad housekeeping skills. We're gonna get a little bit bigger than that. I'm talking about larger self-doubts, insecurities, traumas, grief, and guilt that followed me through life and became a part of how I learned to define myself. Part of me who spent my life feeling as if I was never quite good enough. The little girl who was happy, having a lot of potential, but never quite fulfilling it. Teenager who would sooner read a Nancy Drew mystery for the third time than crack open a textbook. The young adult who dropped out of college and spent 10 years of her life as a bartender, enjoying what she served just a little bit too much. The daughter who drifted away from her family for many years and wasn't there for some really important life events. The woman who found a man who was separated but not yet divorced and allowed herself to fall hopelessly in love, even though there was another woman and 2 children that were hurt in the process. And the woman whose life shattered when that man passed away. But my flaws, my pain, the cracks that I am made of, they're not unique to just me. We all have them, don't we? Sure, your imperfections may not be exactly like mine, but they're there. Has anyone ever heard of kintsugi? I'm looking at you. Kintsugi. Kintsugi is the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold. And the beautiful thing about this process is it doesn't try to hide the flaws. It treats the flaws as something of beauty, something to be honored and appreciated, not covered and disguised. How does that relate to our own imperfections? Well, the key to this is what I'm calling divine duct tape. The golden repair of our breaks that comes from recognition, forgiveness, and stepping into love. We heal ourselves by allowing ourselves to see our cracks clearly, and then forgiving ourselves for being flawed. We heal by realizing that our cracks allow our divinity, that which we have shackled in pain, self-doubt, and fear. It allows that divinity to shine through. And it's almost a magical thing that once we start to fill in our cracks, we begin to realize that the purpose behind this repair process, it's to free us to help others who are buried under the heaviness of similar imperfections. That's why you see the victims of domestic violence begin with working with domestic violence organizations, or those who have suffered from depression become counselors. Those who are healing from substance abuse step in to help others who are struggling with it. Those who are experiencing issues with death teach classes about how to deal with death, right? So if kintsugi is considered an art of reconstruction because it honors the break in an object, maybe our own duct taped cracks can be seen as a way of honoring this perfectly imperfect art of life. Okay, that's our individual flaws. Now let's talk a little bit about the flaws of others. We can't forget that we're all connected and intertwined in this journey, like a big spider web. What others energetically move through those threads that connect us can have an effect on us, and vice versa. Those decisions that we make and the things that we do can also have an impact on those connected to us. Some of those things that we define as our imperfections didn't necessarily come from us. They didn't start here. They were given to us, sometimes on purpose, but much more often inadvertently by those closest to us. So when I was detailing my flaws for you, my cracks, I mentioned the little girl who was happy about having potential, but didn't ever want to step into it. One of my dad's favorite sayings when I was a child, you can't eat potential. It was always said to me as, you may be smart and have some great abilities, Renee, but you know what? You're not using them. And that became a theme for me. Something that I built into one of my intrinsic flaws, my cracks. You have lots of abilities, Renee, but you're lazy and unmotivated and you just don't use your full potential. And it took me a lot of years to recognize that my lack of motivation had been more about needing to find a calling, a goal that truly inspired me than it was about being lazy. And sometimes those cracks are much bigger than in my example. Abusive parents or teachers, priests or spouses whose personal cracks injured us and caused such trauma in our lives that we learn to define ourselves as flawed and broken. And the healing comes in by recognizing that it was their flaws, not ours, that led to the pain. And understanding that their flaws, they probably also came from someone else. Find duct tape, recognition, forgiveness, and love become the keys to healing here also. This wasn't mine to begin with. And somehow, some way, that person who hurt me so badly, they must have been pretty broken themselves. Now it starts to get a little bit more difficult. All of us probably in some way have contributed to the cracks in others. Again, going back to my example of meeting my husband, falling in love before his first marriage was legally ended. So in some way, inadvertently, I helped contribute to the pain that his ex-wife and his children have. You know, his daughter just got married last weekend, and she was talking to me about some of the trips Ken and I took her on. And she mentioned that every time we went on a trip, she was physically ill. She got sick. And I'd always known that our relationship had been hard for his children, but it hadn't really hit me before how deeply they'd actually felt that pain to the point where they're actually being physically ill. But again, that healing process becomes the divine duct tape: recognition, forgiveness, and love. The 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous speaks directly to something similar, right? Step 8 and step 9. Step 8 is about acknowledging those that you have hurt. Step 9 is about making amends. And if we back up to step 2, that states that a power that is greater than us can restore us. So as Richard Rohr said in our reading, it's in doing it wrong, being rejected and experiencing pain, that we are led to the total reliance upon God. And God is the ultimate love. So for our purposes today, the forgiveness process may be about concrete amends like they ask for in the 12-step program, or it may be more energetic. You know, often true repair starts when you forgive yourself and pray for the healing that is necessary for those that you have hurt. Being and sending love. So we looked at personal imperfections. We looked at the imperfections of others. Now I'm going to get even harder. It's going to get tougher. You know, I had this homily topic already in mind. I'd been working it through in my head. And then the recent turmoil in the Middle East hit the news. And I initially thought I was going to have to rethink my whole homily. In fact, Diana texted me right at that time, and I'm like, I don't know what my God is. I don't know. But I stopped and I breathed and I connected. And then I realized that this was all part of the same topic. Now, remember when I talked about that spider web, the strands that connect us all? When we roll that out a little further, when we go out further on those strands, there's a collective consciousness that we're all a part of. And so, of course, cracks in that collective impact each of us, and in turn are impacted by us. There are things that have happened and continue to happen in our world that we all have a hard time wrapping our heads around. The vibrations of those horrendous, unthinkable events will always echo through the strands of our collective attachment. And how does one begin to acknowledge and forgive the collective cracks, the glaring imperfections of our shared humanity? You know, in the book Conversations with God, Neil Donald Walsh wrote, Neil asks God about evil. And God's answer is, evil is that which you call evil. Yet even that I love, for it is only through that which you call evil that you can know good. Let's think about that for a minute. If we're talking about the fact that our personal flaws, cracks, pain contribute to making us a better person and bringing us closer to God, then is it possible that those glaring flaws, the shared cracks in our society caused by the terrible things that happen, could actually be the pathway to society's healing and growth? So where do we find the divine duct tape now? How do we fill in the gold on those collective breaks when they're based in almost unthinkable pain? You know, I think it's still about recognition, forgiveness, and love. Recognition that these cracks exist and maybe always have since that very first act of violence hit our joint psyche. Did it all start with Cain slaying Abel? Who knows? But recognizing the cracks in our world and acknowledging them is essential. Now, the forgiveness part here, that's harder, right? It's easier in theory, but it's a lot harder in practice. Evil, negative, darkness can only be healed by light. We can't all go to the Middle East or Russia or China or Iran and put a stop to the madness. We can't infiltrate the white supremacists, hide every weapon, or shake sense into every terrorist or politician. What can we do? We can love. We can strengthen ourselves, and we can pray. But for those collective cracks to begin to fill in with gold, for that divine duct tape to start the healing process, it requires that we pray for everyone involved. In the shadow of unspeakable pain, can we find a way to pray for those that we see as the villains, not just the victims? Perpetrators in some ways may need our prayers even more than those innocent victims. And if we allow ourselves instead to step into fear and send negativity and ugliness, those collective cracks only get bigger. You know, and maybe that's why those cracks even exist to begin with, because from the point where Cain murdered his brother, judgment, fear, revenge, and retribution have seemed easier than love. And so the cycle continues until we figure out how to send love to those that we deem unlovable and those that we see as the personification of our ugliness, the ugliness of our humanity. Now, I'm sure there are some of you that are saying, Renee, that all sounds good, but I honestly am not ready to forgive the evil. It's just too fresh, that pain. It's just too hard. I can't do it. You know what? Maybe some of you are not even ready to forgive those individuals who contributed to your cracks and pain, much less ready to pray for those who inflict what we see as evil on the world. And you know what? That's okay. It's all part of our perfectly imperfect human journey. There's no need for anyone to step somewhere that they're not ready to step. Some of us may need to start small, maybe just easing our way into recognizing our own cracks. And when we're ready, then we can start forgiving them and loving ourselves. And then maybe slowly we'll be able to start the process with others and eventually the collective. You know, remember what Richard Rohr told us in the opening reading. We find God not by doing it right, but by doing it wrong. There's a reason that we're human, and it's not because we're perfect, but because we're perfectly imperfect. That, my friends, is the journey. And so I'm going to leave you with one last quote from author and neuroscientist Abhijit Naskar. He says, "You ask me, is there a perfect soul? I say imperfect souls chase perfection. Perfect souls wield their imperfection as their greatest strength." Thank you.
Bye. Yeah, thank you, Renee. That was awesome. And we'd like to say goodbye to our Facebook friends, but before we go, we have a Halloween Spirit Fest on October 29th at the Crumhorn Coffee House in Oneonta. And it's going to be a lot of fun. You can find, we have a lot of other events coming up, and events and classes and teachings. ISD Oneonta.org is our website. So we hope to see you at some of those things, and come and get a psychic reading.